Hello and welcome to the program. I am DEJI. Now, it's been about 2 months since Nigeria partially shut its borders against its neighbors. The closure of Nigeria-Benin Republic border took effect in August, and shortly after, that of Cameroon and Niger also came into force. The Nigerian government says taking the decision became imperative in order to address the smuggling of contraband items, especially rice, from these countries into Nigeria. President Muhammadu Buhari says the flooding of imported food items into the Nigerian market is stifling government's plan to attain food self-sufficiency and undermining local farmers as well as the agriculture policy of the government. Despite appeals to review the decision, the government has refused to budge. Not even appeals by the governments of Ghana and Benin Republic has made the Nigerian government change its mind. And just last week, the Controller General of the Nigerian Customs Service, Hamid Ali, even took it further by announcing a total and indefinite ban on import and export of goods through land borders. Now, while this may be good for local farmers, some Nigerians are seriously groaning over the effects of the policy on staples like rice, which of course has seen prices actually go up. Some people are projecting that the price of rice could go up as high as even 50,000 naira as we approach December. Well, we have to wait and see if that really happens. But joining me now from Abuja to speak more on this policy is Adewale Ajadi, who is an agricultural development expert and has actually worked with local rice farmers in the 3 states of Benue, Kogi, and Kaduna, providing them with training and capacity. Thank you very much for joining us on the program. Now, what do you make of this idea of shutting the borders now just to have local farmers or just to make local farmers happy?
Well, it's a very powerful and helpful thing on the medium and the longer term. The short-term challenges that people face in terms of price should not blind us to the fact that we have to be self-sufficient as our population grows and as our need grows, especially when we have made a choice that we would focus on rice as a staple food for many of us. So if we are importing rice that is challenging to our people's health, rice itself is parboiled rice is challenging, period. Because if you parboil rice, you're taking away a lot of the nutrients. And so it's a very sensible thing that the government's doing. It's very challenging for the people in the short term, but I think it's a good kind of policy for our agriculture development.
Now, quite a number of people are actually complaining about the policy, and we've seen the price of rice, for instance, gone up. And then there's also the fear that if this is allowed to continue, if the border closure is allowed to continue till probably, say, the end of the year, then by December, the price of rice would probably go off the roof, and then people will just not be able to buy the staple.
You know, it's instructive. You say it's a staple. Rice was not a staple. How did it become a staple? How did it become that we don't have the variety of healthy foods and healthy options that are available to us? We are the largest producers of yam. Yam is a lot more healthy as a carbohydrate than rice. But given what people love and what they consume, we can suddenly change those things. So that's the fact that we are committed to eating rice, and we eat a lot of rice. Having said that, we cannot sacrifice the future on the basis of just short-term consumption. It's a fact that we have a growing and a young population. It's a fact that we have to produce for that population. It's also a given fact that the rice that we import is often expired and often dangerous for consumption. There isn't much that the government can do otherwise than close the border to prevent the smuggling. And this is, they've already taken a policy stance that's affected legal importation of rice. If you look at the amount we used to spend on importation of rice from the CBN, that's dropped about 90%. You know, so they've taken what they could do legally without taking aggressive action as they've taken now. But in spite of that, people are still smuggling in rice. And actually, what you have to also bear in mind is that there is enough evidence, there's enough anecdotal evidence that people even rebag local rice so that they can look like they're imported, so that people can purchase them. It's a very telling thing. We are addicted to things that are purchased from abroad. Why is that? And why wouldn't government change that? Because it's not sustainable. We don't have the money, we don't have the tax receipts that would lead to that. We haven't developed our infrastructure strong enough, and we're spending obscene amounts of money on the importation of rice from countries that use the receipts from our own income to grow their own economy. I think that what the government is doing is right, but I think that they have to do things that encourages access to Nigerian rice. That includes, they have to do things that improves access to Nigerian rice and Nigerian products, agricultural products. That includes making sure that local governments provide platforms for the dissemination of local products. That includes getting SON and NAFDAC to reduce the bureaucracy and ensure that safety is the primary focus rather than infrastructure and expensive things, so that people can produce and process things. That they need to invest in the fact that the things that come out of the farms are sustained, they're processed and they're sustained, because we're losing a lot of harvest because we don't have ways of processing them and sustaining them. So there are many things that government can do in the short and medium time to improve the quality and the viability of made in Nigerian agricultural products.
Now, these things you have identified, don't you think they should be done first before the closure? Because the argument is that local rice farmers do not have the capacity to feed Nigerians, that we do not have the capacity now to feed or to produce as much as we need to consume in this country. I'm talking about local rice farmers now, that they just can't produce what the country actually needs at the moment.
That's factually incorrect. We produce more than we need for our population. Generally, we produce, and we can't refocus the entire Nigerian agricultural and dietary requirements just to rice. Rice is one product. There are many, many other products people can eat. The Nigerian farmer produces enough. Well, it's not aggregated well enough, and it's not disbursed well enough. And a lot of it is wasted at the market, at the farm gates, but certainly we produce enough. And the challenge is to create the capacity to ensure that people have access and that the products have a longer shelf life. And actually that is happening increasingly. If you go into the supermarkets across the country, if you go into markets, you see produce made in Nigeria. But it's very difficult, because many of the people who produce are smallholders. You need people to aggregate. I agree with you that there are things the government can do to improve, but you don't have the resources to continue fuel this kind of importation. The oil market is not buoyant. We don't pay enough taxes to sustain government and the requirements that we have. We have to be realistic. We cannot continue to have an economy that is just about consumption, not about production. It's a very dangerous trend that we've had for many years. If you're going to diversify our economy, you have to take direct action to reduce our dependency. And I think that this might work, and it mightn't. The government has to take risks. There are risks involved here. I'm not saying there are no risks, and I'm not saying it's a perfect solution, but I'm saying that it's a solution. Now, the challenge for the government is to build on that solution, to use the opportunity of the closed border to improve the capacity of Nigerian-made products to compete, to ensure that the infrastructure are given, the facilities are given to the people who are producing things, to ensure that the infrastructure is improved so that distribution of rice reaches all the major centers where rice is being consumed, to ensure that there is different ways in which Nigerian products are identified and identifiable, to ensure that our markets are improved. Nobody wants to go into markets that are full of dirt and not hygienic themselves. These are things And you can't put it just on the federal government. You know, the problem in Nigeria is that we think that everything has to be done on the federal level. The state government has a profound responsibility under the Constitution for agricultural development, and so do local governments. What do local governments do? Why can't they manage the markets more effectively? Why can't they ensure that products that are produced in their local governments are available more viably? They have a role to play. So I think that we are ignoring the point that there are parts of our system that can be improved that will make sure that this border closure and the sacrifice that people are making as a result of the border closure gives benefit to all of us.
Now, I know you work with rice farmers in states across the country. I'm talking about states like Benue, for instance. Now, you think our local farmers actually have the capacity to feed Nigerians?
Well, we have enough information. I mean, we have to improve our data collection, by the way. But we have enough information to know that we produce more than enough for our population. Not just rice. You keep on going back to rice. I'm not talking just about rice. Because the nutritional benefits of rice, especially parboiled rice, is really, really marginal. So, I mean, if we are thinking about the health of our people, if we are thinking about their viability and not dying, because you spend a lot of time eating rice, and what about the diabetic effect and all of those things, that actually, what is the nutritional benefit of that rice? So you have to look across the world. Our farmers produce cassava, we're about #1 in the world. We produce yam, we're about #1 in the world, and a few other things like that. And a lot of these things go to waste. I mean, let me give you a little anecdote. The other day I was reviewing countries in Africa that are taking advantage of the fact that avocado is really has a great demand in the United States, and the demand is not being fulfilled. And the shocking thing is that Kenya is producing avocado and exporting it to the United States. We produce so much avocado in this country. Even if then it goes to waste. It goes to waste. Look at mangoes. Our mangoes is exceptional in the world. I don't think that anybody who has seen my Nigerian mango or tasted it would ever want anything else as mango. But it goes to waste immensely. You know, you can talk about our pineapples. You can talk about a lot of things. And most of our fruits, they're not really particularly cultivated. They're just available to us by virtue of an incredible blessing in terms of the soil and the opportunities that we have. So, I mean, essentially what I'm saying to you is that if we can get our act together, a lot of these things about rice and all of those things would not be as significant as we are making it. You know, I'm quite sure you know this. I don't know how old you are, but I'll tell you, as old as I am, I remember a time when having jollof rice was only on special occasions. You know, and this is rice that's not even healthy for us. This is polished rice where a lot of the nutrients are gone. So my own argument to you is that our farmers produce enough. We don't sustain it well. We don't manage it well. We don't organize it well. We don't distribute it well. We need to get better at those things. But in terms of the production, we produce enough to feed our country. Now, we have to be able to aggregate it. And we have to be able to get it to the point where people need it and can utilize it. And that's a critical issue.
Now, just before I let you go, what do you think in terms of our agricultural policy now? What do you think needs to change?
Well, we need to really, really focus on getting the system to work for the things you're talking about, the well-being of our people, to make sure that what we produce is managed effectively and gets to the table of people, to make sure that we maintain our organic capacity, to make sure that we have good soil practices, where people slash and burn the land, to recognize that there is climate change. You know, these are all management issues. But, you know, the problem is that the strategic focus of federal government has to be connected with the operational focus of the state governments. And it has to be connected to what the local governments do. And there's still a disconnect. You know, the state governments are used to federal government giving them allocation from oil. And so the internally generated revenue aspects of agriculture is not developed. The employment opportunities of agriculture are not well developed. The entire value chain, including the capacity to develop online solutions, digital solutions regarding agriculture, are not well developed. We're just starting out. The last administration did a lot. We need to build on it. We need to ensure that we don't go back to the days where agriculture is just marginal to our economy.
And I think you're quite right. It's really quite surprising that you look across this country, you take a look at our states, they are actually not investing in agriculture at all. Same thing with local government areas. It just doesn't make sense. And, they all want to actually expand their internally generated revenue, but they're actually not investing in agriculture, which some people would say, is basically a quick win. It's quite frustrating that everyone will be looking at the federal government now. I'm not saying they have to, go own their own farms and all of that, but to be candid, the states and local governments are actually not doing enough in terms of expanding agriculture and trying to make something out of it in their various states and their local government areas.
Well, you certainly have to give credit to states like Kaduna, who have done exceptionally well. The governor has championed agriculture, is engaged women in agriculture, aside from the fact that there's been security issues. Kaduna is, for example, a state that really, really has done well on agriculture, and we're proud to be associated with them. And the commitment, and if there are no security challenges, it will be one of the most exceptional states. But the challenge, of course, is that it is not just about production. The big problem is that we just produce. The real issue is to make sure that we produce for a market. So we understand the consumption patterns of people. We know what is required by supermarkets. We know what is required by different catchments of population. And then we start to educate our farmers in how to produce for that market. What is the point in producing a lot of cassava if nobody is going to buy the cassava and it's going to be a glut? What is the point in producing a lot of yam, as they do in Benue, and we don't export it, and everybody is taking our lunch because Nigeria is the largest producer of yam by far. We waste a lot of yam in Katsina Ala. We don't get it out of the country. And we don't. And Ghana is #1 exporter of yam in the world. So there are many, many ways in which we can improve the capacity. And actually, one of the reasons why we have this difficulty is that more than 50% of the agricultural workers are women. How can we neglect women's capacity and we hope to turn this country around? It is not possible. You can't neglect 50% of your population and excel. So there has to be recognition that all the parochial notions of what the role of women in the economy, role of women in the home, role of women in the marketplace, we have to uplift it and make sure that women's contribution is recognized as part of our viability. This is not about liberalism or anything. This is about critical saving of our lives. If it is projected that Nigerian population will be over 700 million by 2100, are we ready for that? Are we thinking about that? We need to really start thinking about 2 generations ahead and what they are going to consume.
Mr. Adewale Ajadi, thank you very much for joining us on the program, and thank you very much for your thoughts. Well, we'll take a short break now, and when we come back, we'll be looking at President Buhari's new travel guidelines now for ministers and the heads of government departments and agencies. Stay with us. On DEJI 360, we don't just ask the questions. What is wrong with amending the Constitution the way the National Assembly members have been doing it? We seek answers.
Constitution is constituent. Our problem is not lack of laws. Our problem is lack of the willpower to implement our laws.
Answers that provide clarity.
While we negotiate, we should try to make it a point that the girls must be complete.
The clarity you need to make informed judgment so that you can make the right decision and take action. People are saying it is you politicians that are responsible for this, that you are the reason why this is happening.
All these dollars that call themselves governors in this country.
I wish we had people like Tony at the National Assembly.
God forbid that I go to join that ballot.
DEJI 360, providing clarity to issues.